Hi everyone, it's Nichol Spohr here today for Simon Says Stamp, and today we're going to create some stencil layering and gnomes holiday cards using new stamps, dies, sentiment strips, and stencils from the Simon Says Stamp Cheer and Joy release. These are some of my favorite holiday cards to date. They're whimsical, they're fun, they're really bright and colorful, which is what I seem to be drawn to this 2019 holiday season. We're going to be creating the die cut version of the gnomes card first, and then I'm going to show you how to layer the stencils to build the gnomes for the second card. For our first background, I have some Hero Hues Paradise cardstock that I'm going to tape to my glass matte work surface, and then I'm going to tape in place over this the really awesome holiday sweater stencil, part of the new release. Then we're applying Pool Party Hero Hues Reactive ink through the stencil for the sweater design on this cardstock. This is a fantastic basic that works for lots and lots of different types of cards and backgrounds. We're going to gently pull that up and look at the awesome design left on the cardstock. I'm going to take some Hero Hues Reactive ink and sea salt, which is the white color, and we're going to just go around the edges of the panel and blend that and soften the edges, almost to give it that vignette look where it's going to focus in on the gnome that we're going to place in the center really well. This is part of the stencil layering that I'm sharing here today. So once I have that ink color applied around the edges, I'm going to take the brand new Simon Says Stamp Snowflakes stencil, and we're also going to stencil these snowflakes right over top of the holiday sweater design. You're not going to lose any of the detail, but instead just have this fantastic layered look. I'm going to clean my work surface before I do that step, just so that I don't get white ink absolutely everywhere. This creates a fantastic focal point background for our adorable gnome that we're going to build on top of this. You can see the components for the gnome over to the left side of the screen. I did die cut all of the elements off camera to save time, since this is a rather long video, because we're creating two completely different card, similar products, or similar, I guess, design with the gnome and some layered stencils, but other than that, two completely different cards. It's hard to tell as I'm adding the sea salt ink through the snowflakes here, but when I remove it, look how awesome those snowflakes look over top the holiday sweater design. I'm going to make sure and add enough snowflakes here, or partials hanging off the sides, and there is my background all finished. We're ready to start building our die cuts. One of the things I like most about the new gnome die is that it comes with this background piece that's a little outline that you can build the gnome pieces on. It makes piecing together the little die cut elements so much easier. I decided to go bright and pink. I've been drawn to pink so far in my holiday cards this season, so I went ahead and went with it. And the hat was die cut from Hero Hues Azalea cardstock. I felt like it needed a little bit of texture, so I'm taking the previously released gingham background from Simon Says Stamp, inking it up with dull pink ink, and then pressing my hat into it for a plaid pink hat. How fun is that hat? And it instantly adds tons of tone-on-tone texture to the design. We're going to build the sentiment block first. This is the new Merry Frames die. I die cut the main background rectangle from smooth white cardstock, and then I've die cut the Merry part of the frame from Hero Hues cherry cardstock, and some Lawn Fawn fog cardstock. I laid down the Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock piece first, intact, meaning I didn't pop out the word Mary from that. I did remove the frame and didn't use that portion. Then I'm using a quickie glue to go around the edges and attach the Hero Hues cherry red frame around the edge. I also used the quickie pin over the word Mary and replace that right on top with my die cut cherry sentiment. This is going to be the base that's going to ground the rest of the images, meaning we can tuck the gnome and the Christmas foliage right around that. So the placement of this is really important since the gnome is fairly tall. This goes down kind of close to the bottom of our background panel. I also kept the colors pretty muted, just made the word Mary stand out with cherry cardstock since there's lots and lots of color in the gnome and the foliage. I'm also using a brand new sentiment strips, Everything Winter, that reads Welcome Gnome for the Holidays. So cute and clever. Instant sentiments. I love the Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips as they make adding little sentiments such a breeze. I popped that up with a little foam adhesive. Now I'm taking some the Christmas foliage die cuts, and they were die cut from Hero Hues Meadow and Kiwi cardstocks, and I'm going to add some texture with Copic markers. I'm using YG 25 and 17. I'm also going to take the beard from the gnome and we're going to feather in some texture with warm gray markers right on top of that Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock. This is really important if you want the beard to have that actual hair texture. This isn't so much blending as it's called feathering. You're going to feather that color in, pulling little lines from the top and the bottom. It is so worth it, and I even went ahead and went over the beards in the stenciled card designs as well because I think it adds lots of texture. I'm going to add some color to the rest of my leaves with my Copic markers, my green Copic markers. And once we have that, we're pretty much ready to start putting it together. There is the nose for the gnome, which was colored with E00, 11, and 13. There's no need to add shading to the berries that we're going to be placing around the Christmas foliage, as we're going to cover the berries with Nouveau Crystal Drops in White Blizzard. I did end up adding a little bit of shading texture to the outfit of the gnome, which was die cut from Hero Hues Peony cardstock. We're using RV10 and 11 to add some simple shading. I felt like it needed it as I laid it out on my card design and noticed that the hat had some fun stuff going on, the foliage had some stuff, the beard, and I really felt it just needed a tiny bit of shading. Starting with the hat, I'm going to start gluing the pieces to the background panel. You can see that great little white outline there, and I'm starting from top to bottom to make sure everything fits together perfectly, meaning I attach the hat, the beard, the outfit, and finally the nose. I did keep an extra nose from one of the other die cut pieces, looks like the peony pink piece, so I could pop the colored nose right on top, and that gives it a little extra dimension. Also, I had saved the pink, bright pink, that azalea pink die cut piece from the outfit, and I am adding little drops of glue and inlaying those bright pink pieces in the light pink. This gives an awesome two-tone effect as well. Instead of the white behind, we've got the pink, which I like a lot better. These pieces are super small, so I definitely recommend a crystal katana or other kind of pickup stick for this step. I tucked one of the foliage pieces there behind the Merry Greeting, and then I added dabs of glue or dots of glue to the berries and added the red berries to that branch with the crystal katana. I'm going to tuck my other leaves over to the left, add dabs of glue, and add my berries to that foliage as well. It's really coming together now. Time to add finishing touches. First, I'm adding Nouveau Crystal Drops in White Blizzard, as I mentioned, to the berries. This gives that sparkly, sugared effect. I would recommend letting this sit and dry completely before doing any of the additional steps. I did have to lift up one of the little leaves there so that the Nouveau Crystal Drops could dry behind it. I let that sit for about an hour and came back and put my card together. We're also going to take Nouveau Crystal Drops and add those to the center of some of the snowflakes here in a bit. I added a dab of glue to the top of the gnome hat, and I'm taking a teeny tiny white pom-pom to finish adorning his hat. How fun is that? Adds tons of texture, and it's just the perfect finishing touch. In the center of the snowflakes that we've stenciled in the background, I'm going to add those White Blizzard Nouveau Crystal Drops, which will add, again, just a little additional sparkle to the background. I'm going slow and being really careful to not press the bottle too hard so it doesn't splatter out all over the project. Finally, I'm going to take a white gel pen and add a little highlight to the gnome's nose to finish this card. I think gnomes are so much fun, and we're seeing them everywhere this holiday season. Next, I am going to take the hat images from the gnome's stencil and very, very lightly, using a pencil, draw in the gnomes on my card. And that's going to include the hats, the beards, and the outfit, and as well as the nose. This is important because I found I had started another card, and luckily I only stenciled one of the shapes. It was hard to kind of gauge where it was all going to go, and so I found that by drawing in light pencil on my background, it gave me a guide. Very much like when you're creating a scene out of stamps and you're doing a lot of masking and you need to stamp what's in the foreground first. This is kind of the same idea. And so I drew in the hats and the beards. What I love is there's 3 different hats, there's 3 different beards. I wanted to use them all. There's also 3 different options for customizing the outfits, which I think is super clever. This is a 4 by 5¼ inch panel of smooth white cardstock, just like we have done before pretty much. I just used blue cardstock before. And you can kind of see that I have my gnomes drawn out. There's plenty of room for the hat and the bodies, and I know I'm going to put my sentiment below like I did on the die cut card. I then took my eraser and erased their noses. I've left everything else intact. Then I'm going to take Lawn Fawn Peach Fuzz ink, my stencil, and one of the nose options. There's actually 2. I think I used the same one throughout. And I'm going to stencil in with a blending brush their noses on each of the gnomes. Then I'm going to take my stencil, clean it off, take some Simon Says Stamp masking paper, and draw 3 masks using the stencil, cut them out, and place them over top of the noses on my background. This card was a bit more time consuming than the first card, but it actually didn't take near as long as I thought it was going to. As I realized that it was going to involve a little bit of masking, I thought, did I really want to do this? And I have to admit that this ended up being a favorite card. I could see myself creating many more of these now that I've done one. I thought it was really easy. It was really, really fun. And being able to customize the gnomes was really super, super cute. Really think this is a unique stencil and something super fun if you're looking to try something new. I am cutting out those masks, placing them over the nose in the background, noses in the background, and then we can move on to the next part of the stenciling. So just like if you were creating a stamped and masked scene, we need to figure out what's going to be in the foreground next. That's going to be the beard in the center in particular. In fact, we're going to now finish the gnome in the center, since the other two gnomes are partially back behind the center gnome. That means I'm going to erase the beard from the center gnome, take my stencil and some Simon Says Stamp fog ink, and gently around the edges stencil in his beard. This is going to give us a fantastic base and a great area to start with, so that we have the shape there, and then we can go back in with Copic markers later and feather in the texture of the beard. I'm very, very lightly just going around the edges with a small detail blender brush. Then we're going to clean our stencil, and just like before, we need to trace the stencil on masking paper, create a mask, and place this over top of the beard. I'll trim this out quickly, place it over top, and then we need to add our outfit, which also will need a mask in this instance, since the outfits of the two gnomes on either side of the center gnome are going to be tucked behind it, and then the hat. The hats for the gnomes ended up being the only thing, and then the outfits on the sides ended up being the only things that didn't require masks for this design. We're going to ink then the outfit in Hero Hues Taffy ink, and we're going to ink the contrasting pattern on top with Hero Hues Fruit Punch ink, pardon me. Make sure that if there's anything next to the image you're stenciling on the stencil, so in this case the beard, I didn't want to accidentally ink through that even though I have a mask in place. I use a little post-it tape to just mask that off. We're going to place our mask then on the outfit, erase the hat up at the top, and then go ahead and stencil in his hat. I used mostly Fruit Punch ink for his hat. In fact, I think I just used Fruit Punch ink. It'll be a minute before you start to see these cute gnomes come to life. Let's go ahead and work on the gnome to the left of the gnome in the center. So again, we have erased his beard. We're going to stencil this with Simon Says Stamp fog ink just around those edges. We're going to draw that mask on masking paper, cut it out, and place it over top. Then, because the gnome in the center has masks, the beard has a mask, we can ink his outfit with some Pool Party ink. And then the contrasting pattern on top, which is a different pattern, it looks like little trees, with Hero Hues Blue Raspberry Reactive ink. We're going to erase the hat, and then we're going to ink the hat with both Pool Party and Blue Raspberry Reactive inks. Always make sure you're masking off anything next to what you're inking so that if you accidentally go over that area, it's protected and you're not ruining your project. Once I moved my masks, I'm going to carefully take some tweezers and just gently pull up these masks over on the left. I was so anxious to see how my gnomes were turning out, and how adorable is he. So let's quickly finish the gnome on the right so we can pull all of the masks off and see what we have underneath. I'm using the third beard option here, again with the Simon Says Stamp fog ink. I really also love that there's 3 different options for beards here. There's 3 different options for hats. So it really allows you to customize the gnomes however you like. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm going for really bright and colorful. So we've kind of got the aqua teal, we've got our pink and red, and this last gnome is going to feature a bright limey green outfit, which rounds out our bright and colorful gnomes. After I have his mask in place, we're going to tape our post-it tape, or tape our stencil to our background with post-it tape and ink up his outfit with Key Lime Fizz Reactive ink. Then we're going to add kind of the little, I don't know, snowflake looking pattern over top with green apple reactive ink. I did go ahead and add the hat next, and I went in with Key Lime Fizz first. This is a little bit more delicate stencil with that loop in the hat, and I felt like I wasn't going to get a good result. So what I ended up doing was taking Pixie spray, spraying it on the back of my stencil, and then I'm going to let that sit for just a second, and then I'm going to place this back over top once that's dry. I'm just going to skip and add the pattern to the outfit before we go in and darken and deepen up this third gnome's hat with our green apple reactive ink. So I can just line that back up, and now that I have the Pixie spray on the back, it's going to gently hold it in place so I don't have to worry about it moving. The Post-it tape is not holding it in place on this one, it's just protecting the stencil so that I don't get ink where I don't want it. Now it's time for the magic where we remove all the masks. So I've removed them from the sides first. Look how cute those gnomes are. Then we're going to remove them from the center, and there are our 3 bright and colorful Christmas gnomes. The next step for this card is to add texture to the beards. I loved how it looked so much on the die cut gnome card that I knew instantly that I wanted to do that for this design as well. I've sped it up a bit, but it's the same process as coloring over the die cut beard. The only thing is you need to be kind of careful going around the nose. But the texture of feathering in the beard hairs adds a ton of texture, interest, dimension, all of the things to a 1-layer card. This card is mostly 1 layer, as I'm going to layer on stenciling, inking, a stamped and embossed sentiment. But then there are a couple, oh, and also some ink splatters I forgot. But then I did add a couple of dimensional pieces with a sentiment strip and then some pom-poms on the top of the gnomes' hats. I think you can really tell the difference in the beards from these 2 gnomes here compared to the green gnome that I haven't added the feathering to yet, and just what a difference a small step like that makes. I will also take a white pen and add highlight detail to the noses on all of my gnomes. I used the darkest gray color very sparingly and then used my lighter warm gray colors more heavily to feather in the hair. Next, we're going to take Pool Party Reactive ink and very, very lightly go around the edges of our white panel just to add a touch of color to the background. We don't want to ink over the gnomes, so I'm using a very light hand and not a ton of ink. Then I'm going to take the same snowflake stencil and we're going to ink with that Pool Party ink over top of the top portion of our card with this stencil, adding snowflakes. This is a great place to add that stencil layering, but remember to add some sort of a mask so that you don't get snowflakes stenciled where you don't want them. In this case, I don't want them over top the faces of my gnomes. Overlapping the hats and things or along the sides is fine, but I didn't want to be too heavy-handed with those snowflakes, meaning I didn't want them covering up the focal point, which are these adorable gnomes. Now that we have that done, we're going to take the Merry and Bright Greeting from the Holiday Greetings Mix 1 stamp set, another new product. I used a lot of new products in these cards today, and we are going to stamp Merry and Bright right there overlapping the gnomes along the bottom edge of the card. I also have already pre-trimmed a Another sentiment strip, Everything Winter, that says Hangin' with My Gnomies, which I think is so funny. We're going to stamp Merry and Bright with clear embossing ink and heat set that with silver embossing powder. The silver is going to show up really nice over top the colorful stenciled gnomes, as well as the really lightly inked blue background. This is an instance where white could have gotten lost, especially the word bright. Merry would probably have shown up pretty well over top the colorful gnomes, but the word bright is mostly over the background that is only very lightly inked with Pool Party. So I went ahead and embossed this with silver embossing powder that looks fantastic. We will be popping up the sentiment strip again with some foam adhesive. I noticed that some of my background wasn't very dry, so I kind of wiped away with a dry paintbrush the embossing powder I placed on there, and I've learned to leave my stamp in my MISTI till I make sure that I'm done. Because I did that and the placement was exactly the same, I was able to heat set my background to dry anything that might have still been wet, that reactive ink probably, and then go ahead and restamp Merry and Bright and add my embossed sentiment. It's a great way to not ruin a background that you've probably spent quite a bit of time on. I'm going to use a box to protect my work surface, and I'm going to use some Picket Fence Distress Paint, watered down with just a tiny little dab of water, and I am going to flick this all over my background to reinforce that falling snow. Want to make sure I had the consistency right, and then I'm just going to tap that and add all of these snowy droplets all over. I used a pretty small paintbrush as I wanted small droplets. I didn't want them to detract or take away from our gnome scene. Then I'm going to need to let this sit and completely air dry. It doesn't take long. The splatters are small and fairly flat. Adding just a few more here and there. I'm going to attach this panel to a white top fold card base, which is going to give it a nice white border all the way around, just like our first card, an instant frame. I noticed a pretty big splatter over the letter H, so I dabbed that away with a dry rag. I'm taking Nuva Crystal Drops in White Blizzard and again adorning the center of my large stenciled snowflakes with droplets, as well as adding a scattering of these droplets throughout the design. This is going to reinforce the sparkly winter falling snow feel of this scene card. The sentiment strips, Everything Winter, again centered right underneath Merry and Bright, adhered with foam adhesive. And then we'll add dabs of glue to the tips of the gnomes' hats and glue small pom-poms in place on these as well to finish off this gnomes card with a great dimensional fun touch. I hope you guys have enjoyed these 2 gnome Christmas cards featuring brand new stamps, dies, and stencils from the Simon Says Stamp Cheer and Joy release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Simon Says stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.